Welcome back to the Rabbi Avi Show. If you've been walking with me on this journey over the last few months, you know we've been tracking a profound tectonic shift in the collective Jewish psyche, a landscape forever altered by the trauma of October 7th. We've been examining what it truly means to wake up to history. Over our recent episodes, we've traced this awakening from the raw, immediate emotional shockwaves to the sweeping philosophical and political realignments that are quietly changing in the face of modern Jewry. Before we meet today's guest, I want to take some time to review exactly where we have been and connect the threads of the heavy essential topics we have tackled together on this platform. A few weeks ago, we aired an episode titled The October 8th Awakening with Chloe Luce, the Director of Arts and Culture at the Tucson Jewish Community Center. In that conversation, Chloe and I confronted the immediate psychological shattering that occurred the morning after the attacks. We explored the sudden birth of what we called the October 8th Jew, that jarring, disorienting moment when the comfortable sun-bleached illusions of security we painstakingly built for ourselves in the diaspora suddenly cracked. For decades, American Jews operated under a quiet posture of exceptionalism, believing that the idyllic life we enjoyed here meant the cyclical gears of historical anti-Semitism had finally ground to a halt. Chloe beautifully articulated the vulnerability, the confusion, and the instant call to community that defined that awakening. We took that societal fracturing a step further in our episode, Ideological Evolution, with Dr. Molly Dunn. Dr. Dunn helped us unpack the macro-level systemic failures that have left so many Jewish families feeling politically homeless. We tracked how contemporary tribalization, reverse discrimination, and the dramatic moral collapse within elite academic and cultural institutions have forced a massive ideological realignment. We talked about how the modern public square often pressures us to police our language, demanding that Jewish trauma be repackaged or muted just to stay palatable for primetime. Dr. Dunn's insights illuminated the deep isolation felt when the institutions built to protect liberal values turned their backs on the Jewish community. And if you cast your mind back to April 12th, we featured a legendary voice in an episode titled Truth, Fiction, and the Modern Golem with Roger Simon. Roger, an Academy Award-nominated screenwriter and veteran journalist, shared his own journey from the secular heart of Hollywood to the front lines of conservative journalism and political commentary. But the crux of that episode was his brilliant move into theological fiction with his novel Emet. Roger showed us how dry journalism and political essays sometimes reach their limit when trying to capture existential dread. He resurrected the ancient folklore of the golem, carving Emet, truth, into its forehead, and dropped this supernatural identity straight into a 2024 spy thriller. Through that narrative, we explored the raw necessity and the immense moral burdens of Jewish physical power, self-defense, and divine intervention in the 21st century. When you look at the arc of these conversations, from Chloe's exploration of personal trauma to Dr. Dunn's analysis of institutional betrayal, to Rogers' look at raw physical power, a definite theme emerges. We're realizing that when numbers, news clips, and op-eds fail to fully capture the staggering spiritual and emotional weight of this historical moment, fiction becomes the best vessel capable of holding the raw truth. We need narrative, characters, and high stakes to touch the underlying reality of what it means to survive. Which brings us squarely to today's conversation. We are anchoring this episode around an extraordinary new debut novel that beautifully bridges every single theme we have laid down since April. The book is called The Past Again, written by physician Benjamin Abravenel and published by Koehler Books. When you lay Benjamin's work side by side with Roger Simon's Emmet, the shared urgency is breathtaking. Both authors actually began drafting their manuscripts years before the current crisis, entirely unaware of how sharply their fictional premises would tragically collapse into real-world history. Both novels reach their dramatic, terrifying zeniths within the crucible of October 7th attacks and the resulting regional warfare, proving that the line between contemporary anxiety and ancient historical repetition is virtually non-existent. Both books pull no punches in exposing the cultural gaslighting of the modern world, where mentioning historical anti-Semitism or Jew hatred is treated as aggressive, and perpetrators claim the mantle of victimhood. But where Roger Simon leaps into magical realism, espionage, and supernatural intervention, Benjamin Abravenel delivers a deeply grounded psychological family drama centered on assimilation, erasure, and transgenerational trauma. Set in the idyllic, carefree paradise of Santa Barbara and neighboring Montecito, places we explicitly associate with a sun-bleached, idyllic lifestyle, The Past Again traces a profound generational rift. It features a father who represents the naive confidence of American exceptionalism, a young protagonist named Judah who aggressively tries to shed his name and heritage to adopt a posture of dogmatic atheism just to fit in, and a mother named Lori. Lori was born in Baghdad and survived the horrific systemic trauma of the 1941 Farhud pogrom. She goes to great lengths to play down her Mizrahi roots, wishing to present herself strictly as Israeli and hiding her Iraqi past even from her own family. She does this not out of shame, but because her history has left her with a haunting, lingering truth that her American family refuses to see, that a suitcase must always remain packed in the closet because paradise is never permanent. Are diaspora Jews destined to forever keep that suitcase packed? Is the past truly never past? Or is there a horizon of hope to be found in our collective resilience, our intellectual tradition, and our family bonds? Joining us remotely from the Bay Area to unpack this captivating story is physician and debut novelist Benjamin Abravenel. Benjamin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You have practiced medicine for 35 years, yet you chose to dive into the world of fiction for your debut. As a reader, I will tell you frankly, I don't ordinarily seek out fiction, but your novel completely captivated me. because it mirrors many of the exact anxieties, nuances, and conversations taking place across modern American Jewry. What was the turning point in your life that made you choose a story rather than an essay or a memoir to unpack these heavy truths?
Well, I've always loved stories and I've always loved novels. I love the concept that we create something out of nothing, or really not nothing, but something out of our experiences in life. And I didn't know what I wanted to write about. And I had a patient who was an Auschwitz survivor. And we were talking about what was going on in Europe with increasing anti Semitism, which is obviously where she's from. And I said, aren't we lucky to be in this country? We are so lucky that the United States existed, or else I would have died 10 times. I would never even been born. The pogroms, the Holocaust, Stalin. Um, we're so lucky. And she said, so far. And then she kind of looked at me wryly and said, I always keep the packed suitcase in my closet. And I looked at her and I thought, really? I never really thought of America as being that way. And then a few years later, I traveled to Europe, which I've been to many times. And I started to literally see the writing on the wall in Europe. I started to see graffiti such as a Star of David equals a swastika, um, not just anti-Zionist, anti-Israeli stuff, but anti-Semitic stuff in the subways of France, in London. And I knew I wanted to write a novel about where I grew up in Santa Barbara. And I knew I wanted it to have something to do with Jews and Judaism, which is so important to me. So I started writing, and I ended up writing about a dystopian experience in this family in Santa Barbara.
And as you just said, it takes place in your hometown of Santa Barbara and neighboring Montecito, places explicitly associated with sun-bleached, carefree, idyllic lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most beautiful, serene,
It really is. Yet
place. It's idyllic.
yet beneath that surface, you write about a subtle, creeping anti-Semitism that eventually crescendos into something terrifying. Why is it important to show that these cycles can repeat themselves even in America's self-proclaimed paradise?
Well, if you look at the history of the Jews over the past 2,000 years, we you can look at the Hellenization of the Jews 2,000 years ago. You can look at how the Jews were court Jews and had were the top advisors for royalty in Europe for hundreds of years. And then suddenly things turn against us, and it happens over and over and over again. I mean, Jews in Austria and Germany reached the highest pinnacles of society. I think at one point, one was a prime minister, one won a Nobel Prize, one was president of the most prestigious university. We reached the highest levels, and then slowly certain elements of society turn against us. And the question is whether that could happen in the United States. And I'm not sure if it could happen here, but I'm not sure if we're going to see SS troopers in the United States. Probably not. I'm more concerned about an increase in lone wolves, people who could attack Jewish institutions, day schools, synagogues. And lone wolves are impossible to stop. And as our societies become more tribalized and fragmented, and an increase in anti-Semitic fervor. And the unique thing about anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, is that it comes from both sides, the far left and the far right. And we're seeing that now with Carlson, Candace Owen, but we're seeing it from the left. We're seeing it from Graham Plattner, who has a Nazi SS troop thing on his chest. We're seeing it from Ilhan Omar, Hassan Piker. We're seeing it from the mayor of Manhattan, of New York, who is talking about dark money, just the way Jewish dark money, the way, and bankers, the way was spoken about Jews in the early 1930s in Germany.
And
Yeah.
I talk about these things a lot on my show, actually. So I think you're spot on. And we do see it on the right, we do see it on the left, and feels sometimes like this is the one thing that everyone can agree upon, which is that the Jews are to blame, and that and so it's disconcerting. I got to tell you. So I just returned from Israel, and I was reading your book, uh, through part of that journey. It added a profound layer of weight to the experience. When you were writing this, did you foresee how sharply the themes of diaspora, vulnerability, and the search for an absolute safe haven would collapse into reality after the events of October 7th?
I started this book about 10 years ago, but I didn't really start writing more until I semi-retired about 4 years ago. I did not foresee it, but it's interesting you talk about a safe haven, for the diaspora being Israel. I'm not sure, and at the very end of the book, I probably shouldn't give it away, but I question if there's a safe haven for Jews anywhere, because if Iran has nuclear-tipped ICBMs, I'm not sure if Israel is a safe haven. If they wanna create a second Holocaust, there's 6 or 8 million Jews in Israel in a very small place, and this keeps me up at night all the time because we have not I don't know if we're gonna be able to destroy an Iran with, nuclear ability.
Let's look closer at the family at the heart of your novel. After a childhood trauma involving early exposure to Holocaust imagery, your young protagonist, Judah, drops his name entirely and insists on being called James as a shield to fit in and feel safe. James's father, Brian, is a deeply analytical Talmudic scholar, but his mother, Lori, has a completely different relationship to history. She was born in Baghdad and survived the trauma of the 1941 Farhud pogrom. Yet she goes to great lengths to play down her Mizrahi heritage, wishing to present herself strictly as Israeli, hiding her Iraqi roots even from her own family. What were you exploring there regarding the internal hierarchy or pressure within the Jewish world to fit a certain narrative? And why was it that Lori felt her Mizrahi past was a threat to her family's safety in America?
Well, I wanted to show the contrast between a man who grew up in the safe, idyllic world of Santa Barbara, and he was, I don't know, third or fourth generation Californian, to this woman who grew up in this traumatic background in Baghdad during the Farhud. Um, and they both saw the experiences going on in Santa Barbara so differently, because of their background. I don't think that she felt that her background endangered her family. It's just that her experiences um, informed her of the risks to Jews anywhere. And she didn't grow up in the United States, so she didn't see the United States as being exceptional. She thought, if it happened in Baghdad, it could happen to me in Baghdad or my family. It could happen in the United States. Whereas her husband just thought that was the most ridiculous thing in the world. I mean, come on. We live in paradise, and I've always felt safe here and nothing's gonna happen. But I don't think that her past endangered her, it just informed her of the danger. I wanna make one comment is that the reason why James or Judah chose the name James is because his mom just read James and the Peach Tree by Roald Dahl, who is one of the most virulent Jew haters in the past,
In recent
in
history, yeah.
yeah, I mean, which is kind of ironic.
Also for our readers and for our listeners, I should say, that people should be aware that Baghdad was 20% Jewish
Absolutely.
before those riots started. So Baghdad was a very, very Jewish city, and a lot of people in America don't realize how Jewish the Middle East was. Uh,
Was,
yeah,
was.
and now
Yeah,
there's virtually no Jews left in all of Iraq.
well, that's the true ethnic cleansing,
100%.
and that's not just Iraq, it's Syria, it's Egypt, it's Algeria, it's Libya. It's
Lebanon, yeah, it goes on and on.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Um,
James
there's
spent
There's 0 Jews left in Afghanistan.
That's right. I think there's 3 Jews left in Egypt or something like that, excluding the Israeli embassy, I'm sure. Um, James spent his teenage years aggressively adopting a posture of dogmatic atheism, well, essentially treating his Jewishness as a burden or a historical weight he wishes to escape. Yet he is caught in an intense push pull dynamic, carrying a deep, quiet pride in the critical thinking of his heritage. How much of James's character is a reflection of a broader generation of American Jews who try not to rock the boat until history forces their hand?
Well, it's interesting you say that because this all brings up the issue is what is a Jew? To me, a Jew is a civilization. It's a people. Religion is in the core of it, but one can be a Jew and an atheist. In fact, a lot of Jews are atheists. Um, but I would say that James, who goes back and forth with his name, I think that he begins to really realize that a lot of who he is because of his Jewish background. I don't make it clear if he goes back or if he becomes religious. I don't think he does. I think he's more concerned about the morality and ethics of Judaism, which do come from the religion. But a lot of Jews very strongly believe in the morals and ethics of Judaism and of the Jewish religion, but not all those peoples have a strong belief in the concept of a deity. It's complicated, but it's very hard for non-Jews to understand. I thought Jew was a religion. I thought religion is at the core of it, but we are a people of civilization and ethnicity, and it's very hard for non-Jews to understand that.
Well said.
There's one comment I want to make is that when I did my DNA studies,
Yes.
I said I was 98% Ashkenazi Jew. So when a Methodist or a Catholic, or a Lutheran does their DNA studies, it never says they're Methodist or Lutheran or Catholic.
That's true. That's very
So
true.
my identity is in my DNA.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you speak about DNA that, and our listeners need to be aware of this as well, and it's something I've mentioned. The DNA of Ashkenazi Jews is closely related to Sephardi Jews, and the 2 of them, have a great deal of Levantine qualities in their DNA, and we're actually very closely related to Palestinians and
Absolutely.
others in the Levant.
That's where we come from. The people call us settler colonial Europeans. I'm not European. I have no European blood. I'm Middle Eastern.
And the Europeans never saw us as Europeans, so it's
Oh
really
God, no. Absolutely.
it's ironic.
Well, the other just comment I'm going to make about saying that Jews are the strangers to the Middle East, when archaeologists start digging and they find 3,000-year-old archaeologic sites, it's not in Arabic, it's in Hebrew.
That's right. A striking mirror to James's identity crisis is his best friend Chase Ravenscroft. While James is running away from his book-filled, overtly Jewish home, Chase is completely drawn to it. But then we learn a devastating truth. Chase's father, Christopher, actually comes from a deeply Jewish background himself, originally named Nathan Rosenfeld, and completely changed his name and hidden his past to assimilate into the elite country club world of Montecito. Christopher Ravenscroft, Nathan Rosenfeld, chose absolute erasure, absolute erasure to achieve the American dream. He didn't even share his background with his own son. When Chase discovers this parallel secret, it shatters his worldview. What does Christopher's character tell us about the hidden cost of total assimilation in the 20th century?
I don't think Christopher really cared. Christopher is the most vacuous character I created. I kind of under created him, but basically, if you remember, really all he cares about is golfing. and
That's right.
and he seems like a very happy fellow. His wife has made a fortune. He just spends the days golfing. Um, he seems very vacuous. I think he changed his name because at the urging of his wife, because she saw his potential to make money and she saw him being a nice guy, and, he went along with it. He's like a he's like kind of like a intellectual, emotional desert, but he's a very nice guy, and he is a good father.
So Lori also keeps the massive systemically traumatic details of her past hidden from her husband for 2 decades. In your estimation as an author, does this kind of protective silence within a marriage actually shield the next generation, or does it simply cause the trauma to manifest in unexpected ways?
That's a really good question. The whole concept about a marriage and what you keep from your spouse and what you keep to yourself. I think that it actually damaged the marriage in a certain way because her husband didn't really know her in a full manner, in a full way. There's a whole side to her of anxiety and worry that he didn't really know or understand. And I'm not sure why she kept it secret. She wasn't ashamed or embarrassed of it. I think that she just kind of felt that America was a new life for her and everything was going to be good. And she didn't want to burden her family with her past. Her past in Israel was actually pretty good. She loved Israel. And she was a small child when she moved to Israel. But what happened in Iraq deeply weighed on her, and, her mother was so damaged, as you remember, and that weighed on her too, taking care of her mother, who was an emotional cripple from what she experienced
Exactly.
in Iraq, and, of course, the other thing is that Laurie never completely knows if her father was Jewish or Muslim. It doesn't matter, her mother was Jewish.
Right.
Um,
But it's still it has an impact on someone. The idea that, you could s your origin could come from a rape situation and the identity of your one of your parents is unknown. It does obviously play in psychologically to anyone's character.
a terrible uncertainty.
The plot truly pivots on a minor, innocent playground interaction between James's little sister, Judith, and her friend Ashley. When Judith brings up Holocaust Remembrance Day or Yom HaShoah, it triggers a massive defensive neighborhood backlash from Ashley's mother, Martina, a German immigrant who completely twists the narrative to make her family look like the victims. Martina's reaction is fascinating and deeply unsettling. She claims that by simply remembering the past, the Jewish family is emotionally torturing her daughter. This perfectly captures the modern upside down reality where the mention of historical anti Semitism is treated as aggressive, and the descendants of perpetrators claim the mantle of victimhood. How do we combat this cultural gaslighting?
Well, I was in, Europe, for the past month, about 3 weeks ago. And it's interesting, there's so much anti-Zionist and pro-Palestinian graffiti throughout Spain. Sanchez, the prime minister, is very anti, Israeli, but it's interesting, they never seem to wanna remember the background of Spain and how the Jews were, put to fire or kicked out or forced to convert during the Inquisition, which was only 500 years ago. And, we keep being told we need to have a reckoning of how we treated Black people in this country, which I think is true, but or how we treated indigenous Indians, but it seems like Spain can care less about their history and their the reason why we need an Israel is because of the actions of Spain and Ukraine and Russia. I didn't realize that England kicked out their Jews in the 12 and
100%.
13.
Yeah. And by
I
the
came
way, talking about Spain, it's interesting because Spain is very adamant, obviously, that they're really concerned about the people who identify as Palestinian. And yet, actually, within Spain, I mean, there are Basque people who want independence. And so they have their own territorial situation and they're deflecting that and pointing their finger at the Jews and with our trouble. And all of us care about the Palestinians, and we don't want this conflict to be a thing, and we wish that we had a partner on the other side. But meanwhile, Spain and others, and look at Spain, they have Basques who are really want their own independent country, and here they are, part of Spain, and they're just kind of nobody's talking about that. No one cares about those people.
And they came down super hard on ETA, the Basque. They called them terrorists, s several decades ago. But, if you look at history books in Europe, I think until recently, the Holocaust tended to be downplayed or avoided. Um, yeah, it's interesting. The I see so many in the Bay Area, so many pro-Ukrainian so many Ukrainian flags flying everywhere. But when people ask me, "Are you sympathetic to the Ukrainians?" I say, "Well, the Ukrainians are the ones that killed all my relatives during World War II because they worked very closely with the Nazis, the
Right.
Ukrainian nationalists, and that flag is the flag of the Ukrainian nationalists." And, so Europe
Complicated.
often likes to avoid the history of how they treated the Jews, um, but, they're very, very quick to criticize Israel, and Israel needs to exist mostly because of how Europe was continually trying to kill us.
I mean, I would go farther, and obviously, I think Israel needs to exist because
It's
Hashem.
our homeland.
Yeah, it's our homeland. It's our native land. Some would say our indigenous land.
It
Uh,
is.
so this neighborhood feud quickly spirals into an international media circus and viral outrage. You write a scathing critique of television media, particularly in a scene where Judah is interviewed by a host who pressures him to police his language, subtly demanding that Jewish trauma be repackaged so it doesn't sound too harsh for prime time. What did you want to expose about how the modern public square consumes and distorts Jewish identity?
Well, yeah, that's a complicated issue. People always say the media is controlled by the Jews, but I don't think the Murdochs and the Hearsts are Jewish. Um, I think that people who, have those, TV shows wanna get the most, they want to, be involved in the latest concepts and ideas, and the latest concepts and ideas are becoming more and more pro-Palestinian and anti-Jewish. I hate to break it down in such simple terms, but they're going to want to surf on the latest wave of ideas and thoughts, not whether it's right or wrong, but whether it will gain viewers. And I think that um, I was trying to show that with that episode.
When the tension peaks and a literal parade of hate marchers, when those people, those folks are parading up their street, Brian has a visceral physical reaction, covering Judah's body with his own on the floor. Why was that physical act of protection necessary to finally break through Judah's teenage resentment toward his father's perceived passivity?
I think it was a visceral reaction to protect his son, and I think Judah realized that. I just want to comment that during the parade, the far right and the far left, they that's the one time they got along so well
Yeah.
was
It's so
during
nice
that
that
parade.
we Jews can facilitate
Yeah.
the coming together of these extreme groups
Yeah,
on
you had the KKK and you had the anti-Zionists. I also just want to comment that in the parade in Charlottesville, a lot of people don't know this, but they were chanting, "The Jews will not replace us. The Jews will not replace us." Um, it wasn't anti-black or anti-Hispanic or anti-Asian or anti-immigrant. They were chanting, "The Jews will not replace us."
Right. That's very specific to us.
So, I kinda got that idea to make the parade in front of their house, yeah. But I think to back to your original question, I think that the father had a visceral reaction to protect his son, which we all do to our children, and I think that that's when Judah finally realized the importance of family and
And his identity, really.
yeah.
Ultimately, the family feels they have no choice but to leave to leave the shattered illusion of their American safety behind, fleeing to Israel.
Well, Brian at the last minute began to realize it. He
Right.
still kept thinking, "Why am I leaving this
He didn't
beautiful
want to. He really didn't want to.
it's his home."
But history refuses to leave them alone. The book ends with an extraordinary, heartbreaking irony. Judah is in Tel Aviv with his own twin sons when the horrific attacks of October 7th take place. Judah spends his
We don't actually know if it's October 7th. That's what I based it on, but
okay,
it's fictional.
it's,
But clearly based on October 7th,
it's
but
yeah,
I'm not sure if the chronology works.
and it doesn't matter because those attacks certainly could, God forbid, have taken place at any moment, and,
That's right.
we just
That's
saw it happen and unleash itself. Um, Judah spends his whole life running from his name, his parents' house, and the shadow of that Holocaust book. At the end of the novel, he finds himself holding his own children in a bomb shelter in Israel, facing the exact same transgenerational fear. Is the message of the past again an existential warning that for the Jewish people the past is never truly past, or is there a horizon of hope you want us to see?
oh boy. Yeah. Well, I think number 1, the most important thing to Judah is the safety of his family. Israel, the United States, Jewish. He has a visceral reaction. He needs to protect his children, and he is worried about his children fighting in the IDF, in the Israeli military. He's worried about the safety of his children, and he would do anything for the safety of his children. And the thought of going back to Europe makes his wife, who's Israeli, completely ill. But paramount is the safety of his children. Are we ever going to be safe? Are we ever safe? I don't know the answer to that.
That's obviously the question that the book is begging that question.
I worry about nuclear tipped ICBMs that Iran can develop.
I gotta say, for me personally, starting the book on my journey to Israel this summer, and during that journey, we visited the sites of the massacre, of the concert. Um, we went to Sderot, and we went to the actual site of the concert and seeing all the placards and the signs of every single person who was murdered, in such a brutal way and, raped and just, um, in the
Yeah,
most.
that was the true genocide.
It really was, and to see that and to read your concerns, to be having this kind of echoing in my ear, knowing that this you were addressing, it's not only, this tension that was taking place in Israel, but you're really bringing it up as American Jews. Everybody has always felt we're sitting on our comfy couches in America, we're sitting in the golden or Medina, and, we finally have arrived. I even, um, heard recently, Batya Unger, I forget her, she has a hyphenated name, and I agree with most of what she says. I don't know if you're familiar with her,
Yes, I am.
from the Free Press.
She's
She was
very
ta
outspoken.
and she was saying, something that I kinda disagreed. She was saying that American Jews have never been mistreated, which is not accurate. I mean, certainly, I mean, we've had it better here than perhaps anywhere else, in the galut, in the diaspora, but, my grandfather, studied to be a dentist. He was an immigrant, a Jewish immigrant, and at that time, there were quotas. in the universities. There were Jewish quotas, and
The
we know.
quotas the quotas were brought back.
Yeah, they're brought back. Absolutely, we're back. But I mean, it happened in the early 20th century. He graduated in 1921 from the University of Michigan. He was lucky to get in as a Jew, and of course, country clubs were limited, and many institutions and neighborhoods. Obviously, I mean, right here in Tucson, we have neighborhoods. I've lived in neighborhoods even where Jews were not used to allow we weren't allowed to live in those neighborhoods. I'm sure it's the same in Santa Barbara. Um, and so, um, I don't think that America was ever, a nirvana kind of state for the Jews, but we have been very, very comfortable, and we've gotten past that. I mean, obviously, the country clubs are no longer segregated. The neighborhoods aren't. It's illegal to discriminate against Jews. We are seeing this coming back, as you're 100% right. The DEI notion, bringing this back to universities and to other institutions in a different way, in a kind of reverse discrimination, is something that is really entering. But isn't it ironic that Jewish people feel extremely vulnerable in the United States at this moment? I think that your book really crystallizes that and goes to town with that concept.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know if you knew about this, but at the UC Berkeley School of Law, there were, student organizations that were gonna say that you can't join our student organization unless you say you're an anti-Zionist, or you can't say you're a Zionist. It's like another which is a lot of time when people are anti-Zionist, it's just code for anti-Jew,
Right.
and it's just a litmus test, that you need to say it. When Scott Weiner, who's our state senator from San Francisco, is trying to replace Nancy Pelosi for Congress, he finally had to say Israel Israel caused genocide. You, Jews are being forced to undergo a litmus test before they can move on in society.
And they have to reject themselves. That society wants us to reject our own identity. It's very similar to France. It's like, okay, you can become Frenchmen, you can become citizens of France, but you can't really be a part of the Jewish nation anymore. You have to reject yourself, your nationality, and relegate the Jewish part of you to a religion. And as you said in the beginning of this interview, and as I agree very, very much with you, Ben, that our tradition is not a religion, it's a civilization, it's a peoplehood, and when we're asked to reject who we are and to, uh, kinda play into that thinking we can save ourselves, I mean, obviously, I think you portray that very well in this novel that it doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, do the UC Berkeley law students tell Armenians that they have to deny that they're Armenian and that Armenia does not belong to them?
Absolutely not. Of course not. The only thing that matters in the world is Israel and Palestine. The Chinese, it doesn't matter what they do to the Uyghurs, you know, every other it doesn't matter about the slavery in North Africa toward, sub-Saharan black Africans, the way that Arabs are oppressing them. Doesn't matter that Christians are being massacred in Nigeria and Sudan and other places. I mean, and that Syria massacred, 900,000 of its own people, or that 30,000 people were massacred in Iran in 2 days as Israel tries desperately to avoid, civilian casualties and to warn, populations when they have to really take out terrorists. Israel is blamed through this Jew hatred, and, it's upsetting is an understatement, obviously. I think you and I are irate about this and concerned and worried. I just kinda wanna ask you to leave us with a message here. As an author and as a physician who has spent a lifetime studying human vulnerability and healing, what's the ultimate message you wanna leave us with?
Well, there's one character in the book I always think of. It's the grandmother who had the tattoo, and she was one of the most optimistic people in the book. And she said, "I'm still here."
Yeah, when
And
you say tattoo, you're talking about from Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, yeah. And so I think that the Jews have survived for thousands of years, and they've persisted. And basically, I think that we're still here, and it's through our cohesiveness of our religion, of our culture, of our importance of family, intellectualism, critical thinking that we've survived, and I think we'll continue to survive. But the future road is going to be rocky. Um, I worry about diaspora Jews in Europe, maybe here. I certainly worry about Israel, but I think that we will survive and persist.
Hopefully, your book will be food for thought to consider, and I hope that people strengthen their Jewish connections, their cultural understandings, and deepen their ties to our civilization. Thank you so much, Benjamin Abravenel, for gracing us on the Rabbi Avi Show.
Well, thank you.
What a profound, haunting, and ultimately challenging conversation with Benjamin Abravenel. His novel, The Past Again, leaves us grappling with the ultimate question hanging over modern American Jewry. In a world where paradise can turn into a crucible in an instant, where can a safe haven truly be found? From the streets of Baghdad during the 1941 Farhud to the sun-bleached hills of Montecito and right into the contemporary bomb shelters of Israel, Benjamin reminds us that our identity is not merely a casual religious preference. It's an interconnected civilization and a continuous historical chain. There is an extraordinary echoing irony in the contrast between the two books we've focused on over these past few months. In Roger Simon's Emet, security is pursued through the mystical, supernatural power of a golem. In Benjamin Abravenel's The Past Again, protection comes down to something far more visceral and human. A father on a living room floor, physically covering his teenage son's body to shield him from a passing parade of hate. Perhaps the true answer to our contemporary anxiety lies precisely at the intersection of both concepts. It requires what our tradition calls bitachon, absolute trust in the divine, balanced with hishtadlut, the active, personal effort we must exert in the physical world. It requires an unshakable connection to our heritage, a rigorous commitment to critical thinking, and the willingness to stand up and protect the next generation. As the Auschwitz surviving grandmother in Benjamin's book beautifully declared, despite the cyclical horrors of history, I'm still here. As we close out today's episode, I want to talk to you directly, face to face, about the platform you are listening to right now. We don't shy away from the heavy truths on the Rabbi Avi Show. We've spent months dissecting the psychological shattering of the October 8th awakening. We've analyzed the macro-level institutional failures and the feeling of political homelessness. We have stepped out of standard political commentary to look at theological fiction and the moral burdens of physical self-defense. These are not conversations you can have in standard mainstream media spaces. The modern public square is crowded with sound bites, viral outrages, and immense pressure to repackage or mute Jewish trauma just to keep it palatable for prime time. To pull back that curtain, to dive into traditions, political realignments, and the raw vulnerability of our people takes an an immense amount of time, independence, and operational resources. Our show is entirely independent, produced under the banner of horizontal media. We're not backed by massive corporate sponsors, and we don't answer to institutional boards who tell us what we can or cannot say. We answer only to the truth. But independence requires a foundation, and that foundation is you. If you find value in these long-form dialogues, if you believe that independent Jewish media is an absolute necessity as we navigate this rocky future road, I'm asking you to step up and become a financial partner. Please visit patreon.com/horizontal media and select a monthly tier that fits your budget. Your sustained support is what keeps our studio running, covers our costs, and allows us to keep the microphones on. It turns you from a passive listener into an active partner in the preservation of deep, intellectual, and courageous Jewish thought. If you have been waiting for the right moment to support the content you consume here, let this be that moment. If today's conversation gave you food for thought, please consider picking up a copy of Benjamin Abravenel's The Past Again, published by Koehler Books. You can find it on Amazon. Dig into its pages, talk about it at your Shabbat tables, and refuse to let the past be erased or distorted. As we look ahead into an uncertain future, let's carry our history not as a burden to escape, but as an armor of truth. While we may not be expected to finish the work of repairing this fractured world, we are absolutely not free to desist from it. Until next time, this is Rabbi Avi.